But, Chris, for these purposes, as we look at what the teams in the AFC North need, let's assume the Bengals are going to take Joe Burrow number one. So let's set aside the quarterback position. The Bengals otherwise cannot leave the 2020 draft without what?
Yeah, I mean, the Bengals have a lot of holes to fill. We know that. To me, it's between offensive lineman or linebacker. And I would say more than anything, probably offensive lineman. They've done some good things as far as their interior part of their offense, the last few years, as far as drafting guys, center, guard, doing things like that. They need improved tackle play. That's probably the thing that concerns me the most about their roster. And if you're going to take Joe Burrow at number one and you want his career to last and him to be healthy, that's the proper thing to do, I think. And I think that's a move you could see them make maybe at the top of the second round, Mike, is get that tackle that they feel could be the linchpin and the protector for Joe Burrow. But yeah, Joe Burrow, Mike, the thing I'll just say, just to hit on that, because obviously quarterback would be the number one thing I would say, but it's too obvious here. Burrow is special, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. He really reminds me of Peyton Manning. He really does. Just the way he plays, it's not the biggest arm you've ever seen, but it's still very good. The accuracy is through the roof. And the plays he makes within the pocket with people around him is just special. But I think other than that quarterback, yes, I would want to see an offensive tackle specifically.
And he is the rare case of a college quarterback who did it all in 1 year. Usually we see that number one overall pick coming. We have him pegged going into his final year of college football that he's the guy who's going to be at the top of the stack the following April. And for Burrow, went from largely unknown to Heisman Trophy winner, 15-0 team, and now the unquestioned best player in the draft, or at least best quarterback. Chase Young would argue with him persuasively as to who the best overall player is. All right, I think the Bengals need a receiver. John Ross has been a disappointment. He can't stay healthy. And A.J. Green is not going to be there next year. They may keep him all of 2020, but they're not going to keep him beyond this season. They typically don't keep guys after they franchise tag them. They have a hard time taking that franchise tag and the promise of a 20% raise the following year and turning it into a long-term deal. They need to bolster the position. They've got Joe Mixon at running back. They're going to have Joe Burrow at quarterback. They need a receiver, preferably somebody named Joe, who can catch passes and get that offense fully functioning the way that it needs to. I agree with you. They need offensive linemen because you can't do anything if you don't have somebody blocking. But I'm just not impressed with their core of pass catchers, especially now that Tyler Eifert finally moves on in free agency. He had the potential to be a great tight end. Injuries were an issue for him. They just got to keep their guys healthy, right? Chris, at some point, you got so many injuries to your receivers and your tight ends. Is it just bad luck or is there something else going on? If I'm the Bengals, I spend a little bit of money to try to figure out if there's something else going on.
Well, yeah, it's definitely been an issue. You're right with John Ross, but this was an issue that people were worried about with John Ross, coming out of college, that this could be a problem for his career. And then A.J. Green, listen, I think that was just an unfortunate injury. I think he'll be okay and good to go from here on out. But I hear you. With
all right,
Tyler
Boyd. Dr. Simms chiming in, despite having no medical knowledge or training and no assessment of A.J. Green, says he'll be fine from here on out.
Well, I'm just going by talking about an injury that I've seen a lot of people come back from over time to heal. I know you're just being a jerk, and that's what you're good at. But, yeah, I hear you with the wide receiver thing. I would think that's something to certainly think about in some of the second, third, fourth round, Mike.
Steelers can't leave the draft without what, Chris?
Mike, I want to say the same thing with the Steelers. You look at their offensive line, they're getting up there in age. I mean, whether it's Pouncey, the tackle position, Ramon Foster retired last year. So I really think that's a position. You look at their team, it is, a little long in the tooth. And they need to infuse some young talent there. Defensively, they're really in a good position. They're very talented. Maybe they could add a corner to the fold. But when I look at their offense, more than anything, Mike, I would go either that or the discussion would be for a running back. I think that's obviously in the fold too. James Conner has not been the greatest Le'Veon Bell replacement. He's had injury issues too. So the more I talk about it and sit here, I want to say running back. They need a difference-making running back. Okay, I'm changing my offensive line pick in the back room. I'm sorry. The second round, I'm going Steelers running back to give their offense another weapon.
And I'm going to say that just like the team on the other side of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, they need a receiver that can stretch the field. We saw last year. Now, look, Ben Roethlisberger was injured most of the season, but when you don't have an Antonio Brown who can take the top off the defense, open up the rest of the offense, it becomes a lot harder for your running backs to do anything. It becomes harder for Juju Smith-Schuster to get open. Juju Smith-Schuster is not the guy that's going to stretch the field. In fact, I've already seen some talk that he's not going to get a second contract in Pittsburgh, which will upset a lot of Steeler fans, or at a minimum, they're not going to pay huge money to keep Juju around. You got to have all the tools to be a highly paid receiver, and one of the tools is the ability to run really fast and force safeties to follow you along with the cornerback that they've assigned to cover you. That's what the Steelers desperately need, and they do a very good job of finding great receivers in the mid to late rounds. Kevin Colbert needs to do that this year. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Colbert wants 3 more rounds. He'll just draft 3 more receivers, rounds 8, 9, and 10, and they'll probably all end up being great receivers because that's one of the things that he's very good at. The Browns can't leave the draft without what, Chris?
It's 2 positions that jump out. Again, it's back to the offensive line tackle position conversation. I mean, it's funny we're saying this with the AFC North, or linebacker I look at, but I think more than anything, I'm looking at offensive tackle to be the position they need to leave the draft with the most. I'm not saying that's what they'll take at number 10 in the first round. I do think that there'll be a top-end left tackle to be had there at that pick if they want to do that. But, if there was a linebacker that was in their fancy too, which I don't know if there's anybody really in that conversation for a top 10, top 12 pick at the linebacker position other than Isaiah Simmons from Clemson. And I'm not sure he'd be there by 10. So, Mike, I'm going to say more than anything for their team, they need the offensive tackle.
Yeah, but they've still been looking for that left tackle to really nail things down since Joe Thomas.
Right.
They spent the money. They spent the money on Jack Conklin from the Tennessee Titans, which was impressive. But look, you're right. They need to give Baker Mayfield every opportunity to be successful. And I know it's not sexy to take offensive linemen in the draft. You want players who are going to be generating fantasy stats and selling jerseys and whatnot. But you want to boost the guys that you have. And one way to do that, improve your blocking. All right, the Ravens.
One thing I just to say, you're right though, Mike. I mean, if you want Nick Chubb and Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. to get off, you need those type of players. And yeah, I just think that's pretty much a desperate need for their team. Sorry to cut you off.
That's all right. Ravens can't leave the draft without what?
The Ravens have a lot of, I would say, an edge pass rusher. That would be the thing that jumps out to me more than anything. The linebacker position in general is a need for them. Offensively, hey, I look at them and go, could they use a receiver? Sure, maybe another guy to the mix, but I don't think it's anything desperate there. Safety position, Earl Thomas getting up there in age, that's in the conversation. But with losing Zadarius Smith and C.J. Mosley the year before that, and now having to franchise tag a Matthew Judon, something in the linebacker conversation would make sense to me for the Baltimore Ravens. Whether that's an edge guy or a true stand-up middle linebacker, it is a linebacker nonetheless that I think the Baltimore Ravens need more than anything.
See, and I think with Marshall Yonder retiring, and that offensive line is such a critical component to keeping Lamar Jackson healthy and running that unique offense that was designed specifically to suit Jackson's skills. You need offensive linemen who can move, who can block, who can maybe provide that last little chip to a guy who otherwise is bearing down on Lamar Jackson. So I think they need to focus on protecting Lamar Jackson at all costs because he is literally the franchise right now.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.